So by combining those two, the zone diet and omega-3 fatty acids, you have a very, very powerful approach to reduce inflammation overall, either to treat chronic disease or to improve athletic performance.
Hello and welcome to the Wellness Zone podcast. I'm Mary Perry and I'm here with Dr. Barry Sears, and today we're talking about athletic performance. So Dr. Sears, you have been working with elite athletes since you really kind of began the concept of the zone diet. So can you talk a bit about your first test subjects when it came to the zone diet and athletics?
Well, I chose to work with world-class athletes because they live in a world of inflammation by choice. The zone program was developed to really treat inflammation that causes chronic disease. But rather than testing on individuals who basically are very sick, I said, let's go to the other extreme, people who are living in a world of inflammation because of their training, and say, can we basically improve their athletic performance using the same dietary interventions? Why? You're less likely to kill somebody. So that's why we started out with elite athletes. Initially some local triathletes and also various professional football players with the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Los Angeles Rams. And the results were very extraordinary. So then we said, let's go to a larger group in terms of group studies. And then we started working with the Stanford University Swim Teams in 1992. And asking the question, could we basically improve their performance with the 1992 Barcelona Olympics coming up? Well, the answer was yes. And really an extraordinary yes, because the swimmers at Stanford who followed the program, they won 7 gold medals in 1992, remarkable for one country, extraordinary for one university. So from that standpoint, we knew we were onto something that basically we could reduce inflammation, allow them to recover faster and perform better, and say, okay, now we can basically look at trying the same technologies on people who are compromised by inflammation with chronic disease. But that didn't mean that we stopped working with world-class athletes. We started working with larger groups on an international basis.
So Dr. Sears, can you dive a bit into how inflammation impacts the performance of athletes?
Well, inflammation affects the athletic performance and basically medical diseases by exactly the same ways. There are 2 types of inflammation. One type is driven by proteins known as cytokines. The other type is driven by lipids known as eicosanoids. There are 2 separate pathways. So this is why basically metabolic engineering is so important. It attacks both pathways. The zone diet will be the most effective in reducing the cytokine inflammation. We heard about cytokines in COVID-19. Well, basically any type of medical inflammation also is driven by cytokines. But it's the omega-3 fatty acids that reduce the lipid-based inflammation. So by combining those 2, the zone diet and omega-3 fatty acids, you have a very, very powerful approach to reduce inflammation overall, either to treat chronic disease or to improve athletic performance.
So another thing I want to talk about, Dr. Sears, we always think about when people are training for events, especially world-class or elite athletes, the idea of carb loading. So one of the things you've talked about a lot with athletes is the idea about metabolic flexibility, training in the zone, but then being able to switch fuel sources, during the event. Can you talk about this a bit more?
Well, metabolic flexibility goes back to metabolism. It's your ability to switch from one fuel source to the next almost instantaneously. And that's one of the goals of metabolic engineering, to basically set up the network of gene transcription factors that allow you to make that switch instantaneously. So again, it's great for both an athlete, say for a strength athlete, they need to basically have high energy fats to basically address basically the need for instant ATP. But in your case, in terms of endurance, and you run 3 marathons, basically I need longer term energy, both carbohydrates and fat. So again, as you practice metabolic engineering, you're able to switch back and forth between those 2 sources of fuels to basically improve your athletic performance.
And Dr. Sears, what are some of the other benefits when we're talking about metabolic engineering? It's not just the zone diet for inflammation, it's the omega-3s and the polyphenols. So really, what are the benefits, for following metabolic engineering when you're an elite athlete?
Well, a number of things. One, you have better mental focus. Again, it's not who basically is the better athlete, it's really who makes the least number of mistakes. And that's when they often talk about an athlete being in the zone. It says everything is so easy. Why? Because the brain, which is also controlled by metabolism, is working at peak efficiency. And we've demonstrated in terms of studies in Italy that the ability of athletes to focus more effectively basically is highly influenced by the levels of omega-3 fatty acids in their blood. We also basically know they can recover faster. And that's the key aspect. It's not basically how well you do in an event, it's how well you can quickly recover to get ready for the next event. So recovery rates are also dramatically improved. And most importantly, replenishment of glycogen, especially for endurance athletes, it's highly increased by basically increasing the levels of the master switch metabolism called AMPK, and that's basically the underlying foundation of metabolic engineering, to use the diet to increase the levels of AMPK, and by doing so, you increase your metabolism, and you increase performance. Oh yeah, you also basically treat a number of disease states associated with inflammation.
I was just going to say, these benefits don't just apply to, world-class athletes. Anybody can benefit truly from following metabolic engineering, just even based on all these benefits. Dr. Sears, what about the timing for individuals in terms of like muscle glycogen and recovery? What's the window that you recommend in terms of fueling pre and post workout?
Well, I'll give you what we've done for our world-class athletes, what's worked for them. First of all, before you start any type of exercise, what do you usually do? Warm up. Stretch a little here. Like I said, you want to do the same thing to your metabolism. So you want basically a little warm-up snack, about 40 minutes, maybe 30 to 40 minutes before you start exercising, to warm up your hormones. Because in a short period of time, you're going to put great stress on these hormonal changes. So what's a good hormonal snack? Oh, maybe about 5 to 10 grams of protein coupled with some carbohydrate, about maybe 15 grams, but basically taking about 45 minutes prior to the exercise to warm your hormones up. Now you go through your exercise, you're not going to be eating during the exercise, of course, but you're relying upon your stored energy. And that's why the metabolic flexibility, switching back and forth between fats and carbohydrates, becomes so important. Now, what happens when you stop exercising? Well, now basically other hormones are coming out, particularly growth hormone. So that same type of hormonal snack you had before exercise, take it right after the exercise, before you ever get in the locker room. And then basically have a good zone meal within 2 hours. Because 2 hours after exercise, that window to close, that basically allows you to basically replenish your muscle glycogen stores most effectively, once it closes, it's closed. So those are some of the aspects of how to basically use the aspects of metabolic engineering to basically maximize your performance.
Now, Dr. Sears, since I've been working with you, you've worked with a ton of athletes. And I know you talked about the Stanford swimmers at the top of this. You've worked with Dean Karnazes, who's an ultramarathoner. Do you have any other examples of people that you've loved working with who you really saw how the benefit of these principles of metabolic engineering worked in terms of their overall performance?
Well, as usual, you always have a lot of great stories. And so one of my better stories is there was the world's greatest Ironman triathlete. His name is Dave Scott. He won the Kona Ironman 6 times, considered the greatest Ironman competitor of all time. But he retired in 1989 and started doing triathlon camps. So in 1994, 2 years after the Olympics, he asked me to basically speak at his triathlon camp talking about nutrition, which I did. And then I used Dave as an example, saying, Dave, tell us what you eat. So he did. And I went to the blackboard, wrote it all out, and I said, Dave, you've been protein malnourished your entire life. You were the greatest triathlete of all time. You could have been even better. He says, what? So you could have been even better if you'd eaten more adequate protein because your metabolism was not working at peak efficiency. He says, but I won the Ironman 6 times. You could have won it a lot more. He said, do you really think so? I think so. So next year, he came out of retirement and not competed for 5 years and started following the zone diet. And he came in second by only 5 seconds at age 40. Not bad for a comeback. So again, saying even after a 5-year layoff, just making a slight adjustment in his diet, he's able to return to be one of the top triathletes in the world. And then there's other athletes we had basically that we've worked with over the years. Another good example was Dara Torres. She was an Olympic swimmer. In the 1992 Olympics, she won 1 gold medal, and then she retired. So in the year 2000, she came back to Stanford and said, "Hey, Coach, do you think I can basically make the team?" The coach says, "Dara, things have changed over the last 8 years, both in terms of you haven't worked out, and two, a lot of things in terms of new techniques. So I think your chances are slim and none, with the likelihood of being none. But if you're willing to follow the zone diet, there's an outside chance." Well, she followed the zone diet, and in the 2000 Olympics, she won gold medals at age 33, the oldest woman swimmer ever to win any medals. And one of my other good stories is that of Carlos Tevez, the world-class soccer player. He was playing for Manchester United, but it then was sold to Manchester City. So the coach brought him in and said, "Carlos, we paid a lot of money for you, but in my opinion, you're old and you're fat. And basically, we've got to turn you around to basically make our money's worth." So I said, "The first thing we're going to do, I'm going to send you to Italy to learn how to eat in the zone." He says, I'm eating great now." He says, "Carlos, you're fat." So they sent him over to Italy, learned how to basically work with one of our top zone coaches in Italy. He came back, slimmed down, and basically became the star that Manchester City thought he would be. And was really a dominant force in the Premier League for several years. So there's a case of basically, again, taking a good player who was on the downward slide and turning his career around completely.
Amazing. Dr. Sears, thanks so much for sharing all these examples. And I know this only just touched the surface on your resume of athletes that you've worked with. But like you said, this really can apply to anybody. You don't necessarily have to be an athlete, but anyone can reap the benefits of metabolic engineering and being in the zone. So thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.